Is this on? Can you hear me? Is it working? Excellent. Okay, let's just move this aside really quickly. Okay, all right. This is fantastic. Stephen already did all the welcoming to all the schools, which is just remarkable for me, because whatever it is, 4.5, 5 years ago, we started this company. And I can't believe we're standing here with this many people in this marquee, which is fantastic. Like I said over there, there's about 79, 80. Where's Kelly? Kelly, is it about 79? 79 new starters in day one today. So welcome to all of you. And of course, welcome to everyone back to BridgeFest for all the hard work that you guys put in all of last year and the previous year. So it's great to have you guys all here. So it's a huge celebration, really excited. What you guys just watched was some beautiful work from Preston Bridge. Now, the theme of this BridgeFest is empowering change. Now, for those of you who have been with us for the last couple of years, you'll know that there's been some tricky times to develop the model, the methodology, Sean's favorite word, the pedagogy, of what we're all aiming to achieve here. And we all know there's been some ups and downs in trying to create that, but we have created something really, really special, which is really, really exciting. So we are going into a year which is by far the best year that we will ever have in terms of being prepared and systems and structure. And Nikki will show you a little bit later some of the additions to BridgeLink to really support that. But again, that's from all of the hard work that you guys have put in, not only in committing yourselves to making sure it works, but also, and I tell this to everybody all the time, it's about the culture that you guys have helped create. Because I always say this in the fundamentals, if you guys remember, that Peter Drucker famously said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we can come up with all the plans and all the processes we want, but if you don't have the culture of wanting to do it, then it will never happen, okay? And you guys are fantastic. You've come to Spaghetti Bridge because you guys want to make it happen. And honestly, that is an example of what we can create. So for the people who are new, and some of the people who have been here, they'll kind of know what we're talking about here. But the components of that piece of work based on the pillars was based on a base called Goodrington Base. Goodrington Base, here you are, who came up with this idea that they wanted to celebrate festivals. So they called their festival Prestival, for which they created a lot of mini projects that fed up to Prestival, really wanting to explore how festivals have a cultural impact and how, of course, prescient is that. Here we are with BridgeFest and how a festival can really celebrate the culture. So what they did was they decided to looking at particularly the Hindu festival of Holi, I think it's called, Holi, is that right? Yeah. So with the pillars that they have to incorporate into the project, the first one being the human and social pillar, they looked at festivals and culture, Holi being the particular one from the Hindu festival that they wanted to explore. Secondly, the aesthetic and creative pillar. They wanted to examine dance and movement. Particularly, they wanted to look at mudras dancing, which is related to Holi. Tell me if I get this wrong, let me know. But they wanted to look at mudras dancing that would feed into the Hindu festival of Holi and looking at that. In terms of the scientific pillar, they were looking at physics as per the curriculum map. So they incorporated motion. Motion particularly into looking at dance, so they were able to link it through, okay, which was really, really powerful. The physical pillar, they wanted to look at wellness and well-being. So particularly, the mudras is also used for relaxation and meditation. Is that right? How important is that for the students and the children we work with? So how fantastically powerful is to work that element into the physical aspect of it. For the PSHE pillar, they looked at changes to the self, which obviously is hugely important for the children we work in. And so they formed the narrative that you just watched about how people can change over time. And so they worked in the aspects of PSHE into that topic, which I think is fantastic. And then finally, linguistics pillar, they concentrated on writing a narrative. So you saw there a really, really well constructed narrative where there was character arc, there was an apex to the narrative, there was a catharsis and a resolution, and then there was a moral that was learned. Because in terms of, I believe, the Mudras dancing. They work in morality tales into the Mudras dancing. So it's all linked together. Very powerful, okay? But that's not the only thing that is an outcome in terms of enterprise learning, in terms of a project-based approach, okay? And Andy Sprakes, who really helped pioneer project-based learning with XP, who will talk after me, will tell you this, that there's a power that goes beyond it for which we are trying in Spaghetti Bridge to articulate and capture that progress. So other outcomes include, for example, healthy relationships with peers and staff being formed. Because our students are working in small groups together, because they're exploring a topic and they're answering a driving question, they're forming relationships with each other in the way that we as professionals do because they're working in small teams, because that's the way the world operates now. And that's what we recognize. So that's really, really important. And it also helps to facilitate our relational approach, okay? So you see here that there's a marriage between our relational support strategies, methodologies, and the actual activity planning. They're merged into one because our children specifically need to form those healthy relationships, and they're doing it through the planning of the activity, through answering the driving question. Does that make sense? Okay? There's a power in that, which is far more powerful than, unfortunately, in a curriculum model where PSHE is tacked on as a bolt-on, you see. Okay? And that's why it's important. There's a sense of belonging within the school community. So with this particular project, they actually manufactured the community from base level to school level because they developed the idea of Prestival, which they celebrated towards the end of the academic year. Okay? So they created for these children a sense of community, not only within their own base group, but then within the school. For some of these children, as you know, they have never experienced a positive or healthy community before. So it's so vital that we work that into our planning, which is beautifully done. There's a self-worth as value is celebrated. So here we are, almost 300 people watching that beautiful work, that end product, celebrating it. So the value that those students have now, knowing that that work has been shared to a wider community that goes beyond the base group, goes beyond the school, gives them a sense of value, which is incredibly powerful. As people in the fundamentals remember, that's the Ruskinian philosophy being baked into it, which is really, really important. Again, problem-solving skills. They're not just learning things by rote, regurgitating something for an exam. They're being constructive. They're being collaborative. Okay? And they're learning how to exercise those executive functioning skills, which is very, very key. Finally, confidence, obviously, which is so important for our children to gain that sense of value. And from that value, they gain a sense of confidence to be able to go off into the world in a much different position than before. So can we just have a round of applause for Preston Bridge for doing that? That's really... Academic skills as well. We'll throw those in there as well. Okay, so where were we at this point last year? So if you guys remember BridgeFest last year, I stood in front of you for all of you who were there last year, and I delivered the message that what we are doing is really hard. And a lot of people came up and gave their own examples of the things that they tried, things that didn't work, things that worked. But the key message and the key takeaway, if you guys remember, was that it was worth it, okay? I talked to you guys last year about a landscape of education for which I think, and I still think it's the same now, that we all agree is simply just not good enough. We talked about a society where children are struggling, and we all agree that's just not good enough, okay? And I said that we have an opportunity to change that. It's the pebble that starts the avalanche. So we come up with a way of working with children which is better, which has better outcomes, as just outlined. And we show people how to do it, and that can be the pebble that starts an avalanche of change, and that's one of the main reasons why we're here, okay? And we have investors who back that idea, don't you guys? Wholeheartedly, which is fantastic. It's very, very rare, I'm being honest with you, to be supported in the way that we're supported, to be able to do this, and which predicates effectively the culture that we have today. So it's really exciting, okay? We're moving into BridgeFest this year, and the theme is empowering change, because last year we went like this. You guys all worked together. We had fantastic outcomes, fantastic achievements, which I'll go through in a little bit. But we came out of it, we had created something which is amazing. We're going into this year with a more structured process, greater clarity, greater articulation. We have more staff. We have a new school structure, which is going to facilitate those outcomes for the children. Okay, we are in a fantastic position for you guys to be empowered to make the change that we've all signed up to do. Make sense? Excellent. Okay. So, but having said that, let's also look at where we were at this point last year in the country. Okay? Now, if you guys remember, I stood up in front of you guys and I outlined a lot of statistics about where we are in the country. And obviously, as you remember, they were bleak. So here's some of the slides from last year. Remember, I asked how much has changed in terms of the mental health crisis, and I cited articles from Independent, Guardian, and Telegraph outlining some bleak stats like a 39% rise in referrals for NHS mental health for under 18, so on and so forth. And I'm sure everybody who's sitting in here, if you consume the media, you'll see that quite regularly there's a new article coming out talking about how children are still struggling. Yes? Yeah? Other articles from the Evening Standard last year, Mail Online, and The Guardian, talking about, for example, that Mail Online one's quite inflammatory. A child is hospitalized every 20 minutes last year on an average for intentionally poisoning themselves with drugs or alcohol. Okay? It's not good, right? We also talked about education last year at this point, how the pressures of education changed. And there was a number of articles we cited talking about how the pressure of exams statistically has a huge impact on the attendance records for children not being able to cope with the volume of work and crashing out of the system effectively. And obviously, for those of you who have worked with us for some time, you'll know that a lot of our children come from that system and have struggled to be able to cope, okay? So where are we now? Where are we now in relation to a year later? Okay, well, it's not any better. School refusals, as we speak, are at an all-time high. So across the UK, 28% of 12 to 18-year-olds have not attended school over the last year because of anxiety. Okay, so that's a third. A third of 12 to 18-year-olds have not gone to school in this country over the last year. Yeah? Mental health crisis among young people has become worse. It's become worse. As of August 13th, The Guardian reports on or comments on a report published by the Lancet Psychiatry Commission on youth and mental health, which examines the last 2 decades of research, which found, quote, that intergenerational inequality, unregulated social media, wage theft, insecure employment, and the climate crisis are driving a dangerous and alarming global surge in mental ill health among youth, which is getting worse and worse. Now, it's interesting. Here I am. Last year, we talked about England. Now here I am talking about the world. You know, it seems to be compounded and just getting worse and worse. In fact, what the report talks about is that the mental ill health accounts for at least 45% of overall burden of disease in people aged 10 to 24. Just let that sink in first. We're talking about disease, any disease. We're not talking about mental health. But disease, 45% of disease is related to the mental health for that age group, which is ridiculously astounding, okay? It even gets worse because The Guardian actually criticizes the report because the report only looked at high, middle to high income countries, okay? But irrespective of 45% of disease being called by mental health, only 2% of government budgets are dedicated to mental health in terms of giving the resources that they require, okay? And in some countries, in the lower middle to low income countries, that unmet need meets 100%, okay? Which is crazy, okay? And then finally, suicide, the report says, is a leading cause of death among those aged 15 to 44 in Australia, 15 to 19 in New Zealand, and people aged 15 to 39 in India. So suicide has become the leading cause of death for those age groups in those countries. I suspect that Britain, America are not too far behind, okay? But what about in education, okay? World educationalists are still calling for education reform, but what's changed from last year is that now so is the government, okay? So this report was published in 2023 of December by the Education for 11 to 16-year-olds Committee in the House of Lords, okay? Generally, the report, now listen to this carefully, the reforms to the 11 to 16 curriculum, assessment model, and school performance measures introduced by the government since 2010 have led to an education system which is heavily focused on academic learning. Schools have been incentivized to focus their resources on a narrow set of core subjects, meaning many pupils now have fewer opportunities to experience more practical, applied forms of learning, and to study creative, technical, and vocational subjects. Pupils are now assessed purely by exams in many GCSEs. The current assessment model puts intense pressure on schools, teachers, and pupils due to the high stakes attached to pupil performance during just a few weeks of written exams. The government faces increasing calls to significantly reduce the number of exams pupils take at age 16 as part of a long-term program of reform. Now, this is not me saying this. This is the government saying this. This is not an academic sitting some university saying this. This is the government saying this, okay? Now, it's interesting that they're saying this when we were saying it 4 years ago, right? So it's a good thing that we're obviously ahead of the curve, okay? But it's a bad thing in terms of our children and what they really, really need, okay? So the report makes some recommendations. Number one, to reduce the curriculum content, okay? So if anybody here is a science teacher who's taught the GCSE science, will know, I know Tiff is sitting here shaking your head, will know that the volume content in the science GCSE is pretty enormous. I used to be an English teacher in this country, so I've taught GCSE and A-level, and the content is pretty vast. Sometimes I thought, well, what is the point of all this? They want to broaden learning experience. So they want to revise the curriculum to allow for more learning experiences. Okay, sound familiar? They want to focus on literacy and numeracy, of course they do. Enhance digital skills, okay, so moving into a 21st century, they really want to enhance the national curriculum to allow for digital skills to be developed better. They want to reform exams, which is probably the biggest reform that they're looking at, okay? And finally, they want to abandon the E-back, which they probably will do, because they're seeing that it's too academic and it's not really having the impact that they would want it to have, okay? Now, if you guys have been following the news, you'll know that a committee has just been formed to review the national curriculum, which is made up largely of executive principals and CEOs from academy trusts from across the country, and a couple of academics. Okay? I personally am not that hopeful that the national curriculum reform is going to yield what I would potentially want or personally want, but I think it's a move in the right direction, okay? Because the next thing that's changed, as we know, is that we have a new government, okay? We have a new government, and we have some key new players in the game, okay? So you have Bridget Phillipson, as you guys probably know, is the new education secretary. Catherine McKinnell is the Minister for School Standards, who is a very key figure, which I'll talk about in a second. Annalise Dodds has become the Minister of State for Women and Equalities. Jackie Smith, House of Lords peer, covering higher education, further education and skills. Stephen Morgan is the Minister for Early Education, and Janet Dabby has become the Minister for Children and Families. So they have already shaken things up. So they've moved in to the DFE. They've already changed roles, they've changed policies, and for all of you who woke up this scene, scrapped the one-word judgments for Ofsted inspections, which I think, obviously, who thinks that's a good thing? Raise your hand. Yeah, agreed. So that's a move in the right direction. Of the key figures, you have Catherine McKinnell. Catherine McKinnell has been given the SEND responsibility from Bridget Phillipson. So Bridget has turned to Catherine and said, sort out SEND. Now, we all know, being in the SEND sector, that there is a crisis across the country in terms of unmet need across the country, which is exactly why we exist, okay? Catherine McKinnell is going to work hard to deal with that crisis. Now, we don't know exactly what she's going to do yet because it's early days, but she is a key figure to watch. The other key figure is Professor Becky Francis, okay, who's not a minister, but she's been delegated the responsibility of reforming the national curriculum, okay? Because my contention is if you address the national curriculum and the neurotypical mainstream model of education, that could have an impact on how many children fall out of the system, which is exactly what she's trying to work on. Now, she is the CEO of the Education Endowment Foundation. She's also an adjunct professor at UCL. And her beliefs is that she desperately wants to close the gap of social inequality in education and believes in pretty much those recommendations out of the House of Lords reports, okay? Now, the key reforms from Labour, they have already come out and they've already stated what they are going to do, which is effectively listening to that report. So one of the things they want to do is they want to broaden the curriculum. Okay? What that means is they don't want to just have reading and writing and math, because we all remember what was Sunak's big education policy, his flagship movement last year. Do you guys remember? What was it? Maths. Everybody learn maths. Okay? Because he thinks that's really important. And of course it's important to learn maths. But he honed in and he narrowed the subject down, and obviously the education community had a big adverse reaction to that. So Labour's coming in, they say they want to actually broaden it. Okay, so not just reading, writing, and math, digital, speaking, creative skills, and the arts. The problem with that, okay, is in terms of the implementation of the model, is that the subjects are still going to be isolated in boxes, right? Okay, so it's lovely to have those things, which I think is important, but you're a child going to school, you're still going to go to math, English, science, digital art, skills, whatever they're going to put in, okay? They want to modernize, they claim. And the modernize means they want a broader curriculum which includes references to contemporary issues. And what that means is they don't want you just sitting there learning about the Romans, okay? Which I'm not saying the Romans are not important, okay? Lucy knows that. But at the same time, what they want to do is they want to deal with contemporary issues, which I think is great. It's great. Does it sound familiar with regards to enterprise learning? Yes? We look at driving questions across the planet, we try to answer them. The problem is what they want to do is they want to make it more discussion-based, right? So you're in religious studies class, instead of them just going through and looking at the Muslim faith, they're going to ask contemporary questions, which I think are important, but they're still going to be a discussion-based, which is far from what I think is powerful. They also want to prepare, okay? They want to provide a curriculum which develops children's knowledge and skills. Now, it's lovely to start hearing the government talk about and skills alongside knowledge, okay? The manifesto sets out a pledge to support children by studying a vocational subject until they are 16. Now, the issue that I have with this, okay, is that, and this, a la Ken Robinson, for those of you who've read his books, we'll talk about this. Ever since the pre-Socratics, there's been an absolute division in between academic and vocational, between thinking and doing with your hands, okay? And that guys like Larry Rosenstock, who started High Tech High in San Diego, was very passionate and keen to merge the two, because the division of the two creates a social divide. If you can't do this, because that's what's valorized in society, if you can't do this and go off to uni, then you can go off and do this with your hands. And this has a lower value than the one here, which is wrong, okay? And so Larry Rosenstock wanted to merge the two, and Andy will know about that, of course. And he did it to great success, and that's why he gave birth to project-based learning. But at the same time, it's great that they want to have vocational subjects being tacked on. I think it's really good. But it's still going to support the division between knowledge and skills. They're going to say there's knowledge and there's skills, and there's a value attached to each, which is different, okay? There is having knowledge of a skill, and having a skill to apply knowledge, okay? This is exactly what enterprise learning aims to do in terms of its target setting structure, yeah? Okay? And finally, they want to change assessment, which is a good thing. They want to reduce the amount of GCSEs taken. They want to introduce assessment over time through portfolio work. Sound familiar? Okay, this is all good things. So, the pressure will still exist because they're still going to have league tables. So what does this mean for all of us? Okay, so number one, what it does is it validates that what we're doing is right. So you have a lot of really smart people out there working hard to figure out how can we design the national curriculum to be better, to help with all the issues that we looked at the beginning, to reduce the mental health crisis, to reduce children not attending school, to increase results and skills for a 21st century. Those are all the challenges that the government's looking at, and I think they're moving in the right direction. But what it does, first and foremost, is it validates that everything that we've been trying to do is going in the right direction, okay? And now as we grow, we're starting to network with more and more key influences out there, like Ellie Costello, for example, who's very, very interested in Spaghetti Bridge. And in a minute, I'll go through some of the impact that we've had in terms of that networking. Now, how will it impact us? Well, have you guys ever turned a tanker around? Now, I don't know where Nikki is, but Nikki likes to always use the metaphor of the broom. Hi, Nikki. She talks about the broom. Sometimes we come up with something, and then somebody comes in with a broom and sweeps it away, and then we have to redo it all, right? Now, to turn the national curriculum around in relation to everything I'm saying is a mammoth task. Becky Francis is very open to say that. She's very open to say that, okay? And to move it is like turning a tanker around, by which time another government could come in, okay? Or another minister could take over and change it all, a broom, yes? So we stayed the course, of course. But even with all of that change, Becky Francis herself says, however much ministers and teachers might wish it, schools cannot on their own counteract the effects of inadequate housing, diet, employment, and household income. So you could have the perfect curriculum, but no school's structure or curriculum is going to fix all the needs for all the children out there. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of the demand for SEND schools? So the TES has just outlined last week 3 key statistics that that TES are saying that Bridget Phillipson and Catherine McKinnell have to consider when doing the curriculum reform. Those are, number one, which is very similar to what Becky Francis just said, is that the number of children facing destitution since 2017 has nearly tripled to over 1 million. Now, destitution is defined as poverty so severe, those affected cannot meet their basic physical needs to stay warm, dry, clean, and fed. So since 2017, there are now 1 million children in that situation in England. Yeah? It is a subset of a much larger figure of more than 4 million children living in poverty overall. So this destitution, sorry, I just want to hone this in. This word destitution is an actual kind of formal word that they use, which is different than poverty. So when you say child living in poverty, that's one thing. A gradation, which is more extreme, is destitution. So there's 1 million in destitution, but they're saying there's 4 million in poverty, okay? No education policy, the TES says, very similar to Becky, however well formulated or resource, is capable of overcoming the impact of poverty, and particularly of severe poverty. Children who do not have even basic amenities are struggling just to make it through each day, much less be in a good condition to learn. Okay? Figure number 2. The number of pupils with an education, health, and care plan has increased by over 80% since 2016 to more than 430,000. Okay? Figures published earlier this month show that there were approximately 4,000 more pupils on roll in special schools than reported capacity. The new Secretary of State has to accept there's an immediate fix required to stop the system falling over. Okay? Stat number 3. The number of young people aged 16 to 24 not in education, employment, or training is estimated to be 900,000. Okay? So this is up by around 90,000 from 2023 and represents 12.6% of all young people. That's up by 90,000. 26% of all young people are NEET. Okay? So in terms of our schools, they definitely need them. Yeah? There's 2 articles that came out just last week. One, the NHS referrals for anxiety in children more than double to pre-COVID levels. Okay? So more than 500 children a day in England are being referred to NHS mental health services for anxiety. Next, bubble of post-pandemic bad behavior among pupils predicted to peak. So The most recent official figures for 22-23 show that the fastest increases in exclusions and suspensions were among a bubble of younger pupils in years 7 and 8. So what that means is that those kids in 7 and 8 are just coming to the age where statistically they start exercising all of that behavior, which gets them excluded. So what the Guardian's saying here, statistically, we could expect for that absenteeism to go up quite significantly, which means the amount of children knocking on our doors is going to increase quite significantly. Okay, so we're direly needed for sure. Okay, so what we have achieved in doing this. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have achieved quite a lot, guys, and what we've been able to do. Number one, we started a business from scratch and brought it to a healthy cash positive position, largely de-risked. Yes. Yeah. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. There's an amazing achievement, okay? I mean, it's going back to the very beginning. Here we are 4 years later. We're sitting in this with all you guys here. And we have, how many schools do we have now with Valley Bridge? Is it 8? 7. When our eighth is coming online with Hampton Bridge, hopefully January, February time. What a phenomenal achievement. You know, it's so huge. And for those of you who've been with us since the beginning, I can't thank you enough, okay? It's been awesome. We successfully registered and opened 7 schools with a vast majority of positive feedback. Absolutely. You know, you guys are amazing. We've been successful in 5 standard Ofsted inspections with 1 outstanding category. That was just last year, by the way. I don't know if you guys are aware, we had 5 Ofsted inspections last year. Every single one of them we did fantastically well. And we got our first outstanding in a category. By the way, with the announcement this morning, just to make sure you guys are aware, they are only doing away with the overall judgment, not the judgment of the subcategories. So chalk for cheese, right? So it's not really a whole lot of shift or change. We've seen through or seeing through successfully 11 site projects. Now, keep in mind that some of our sites, of course, have second campuses, okay? And I say that we're seeing through, so there is a second campus for Silverbridge that we are going through the due diligence process on. Where's Kirsty? Is it going well? Yes, okay, very good. That's awesome. Okay, we've built a very good reputation in this sector surrounding our unique pedagogy. Now, I wanted to just take a second to indicate some of the evidence that supports that. So, for example, last year we had a publication in Sue Rofi's book, Aspire to Wellbeing and Learning for All, the principles underpinning positive education. Where's Chris? Yeah, so Chris is helping to oversee a lot of this. So Sue Rofi published about enterprise learning in her book that just came out, okay? I would encourage you to go have a look at it. Equally so, we're working with Dr. Vicky Bamsey of the University of Plymouth to design and implement a research study of inclusive practice in mainstream and specialist primary and secondary settings. We're also been invited to submit publications in Edward Elgar and Sue Rofi's upcoming book, The Handbook of Wellbeing in Education, Research and Transforming Practice. Okay, we're also working with the University of Exeter and Cardiff Metropolitan University on them coming in and looking at what we do and how we do things. Okay, now that's huge. That's amazing. That's exactly what we are aiming to do in terms of our mission, to help people understand how you can do education differently in a way that has a better impact for children. Okay, but let's not take my word for it, guys. Let's see what some of the children say. So let's have a look. Oh, finally, we've built a sector-leading MIS system in BridgeLink, which Nikki's going to talk about the new additions a bit later. And finally, sorry, finally, and this is probably, again, this is what I said at the beginning, this is probably the most important for me. We built a culture, okay, which I hope people feel like they can, okay, and that's the difference. You know, I taught in mainstream education in California and here in England for many, many years, and I felt like I couldn't. I felt like I couldn't do what I really wanted to do. And importantly, when we started Spaghetti Bridge, what I wanted to do was create a culture where you felt like you could. You could do things differently for what you felt like was right for the children. It's amazing. You guys are amazing. It's great because in previous years when we put these videos together, it's been a lot of the staff talking about what we do and how we do things and the impact for them. This year, we've been able to see a lot of the students. Pete, our fantastic videographer back there, who makes these videos, goes around all the sites, as you guys know, and he's been able to capture a lot more footage of the kids talking about why going to Spaghetti Bridge School has been great for them. We're going to hear a little bit more intimately of one story from Sam from Prestonbridge a little bit later, which is pretty amazing. So how do we fit into all this, guys? And I'm almost done. Is that we got a 3-stage strategy, which a lot of you have heard before. Number one, if I get it, is that there was always 3 stages of our growth of our group. So phase 1 was the foundations and creative development, okay? That was getting all the systems and processes in place and making sure we articulated it's all supported and structured. We're there. We're there. We're going into this year. We have all of the structure in place, albeit, of course, we are going to improve it. And Nikki's going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But it is in a far better position than it ever has been. So we are going into this second phase, which really is about measuring the impact of governance and communication. And I want to hone in on the communication piece, because really what I need you guys to do is you guys go to your schools later this week and you really start utilizing that new school structure where you progress children from the Explore to the Horizon space, that we can facilitate their accredited route paths, getting them those qualifications, but also increase the sophistication of the output of their beautiful work through the practitioners that we're going to bring in at site level and the regional practitioners as well. So you guys are going to be given the appropriate resources to create more beautiful work. So when it's BridgeFest 25, and I'm standing in front of here, we're showing all of that work, it's going to be even more amazing, okay? My dream for BridgeFest really is that some school out there has to get like a student band going, like a rock band, right? And they're going to be performing here, which would be amazing. So really, that's what the empowering and change is going into the second phase. The third phase will be that quality control and slow research and development. So we won't be as expeditious in terms of developing everything, because it will be already developed and the measure or the impact of it will be fantastic, okay? So what will we have in place for 24-25? Of course, we do have that new school, the new roles to facilitate that beautiful work. So that's a huge thing that we're rolling out. So the management teams at each site working with group support have been working really hard to recruit all those relevant persons to fit into that new school structure, okay? Where the outcomes of the projects at the Explore space will be there, and the expectations will be meeting the children where they're at, but as they move into Horizon, they'll become more sophisticated as they work on their accredited route paths, okay? And I think that will make a big, big difference. We have a defined planning process around enterprise learning, which is going to improve. I think Nikki's okay with me mentioning that there is going to be an enterprise learning planning 2.0 version coming out probably around January-ish time. Yeah, okay. Sometimes I have to have a team of lawyers around me for when I say things. Nikki, yeah. Okay, so we have a well-defined assessment process to measure the plans, the student journeys, to measure their progress. Now, again, like I said before, the outcomes that we measure are not just qualification achievement. We have a lot of outcomes, other outcomes we measure, which will be worked into BridgeLink to show if children are progressing through the 3 phases and going into the Horizon space. So it will become easier to use assessment for planning and to be more ambitious and to have more clarity around where children should be sitting in the 3 phases, okay? That's gonna be really, really powerful. There's gonna be a better defined induction and ongoing training process across the group. So we have a redefined induction process for all the new starters. You are gonna be at the fundamentals this week, which I'll see you there. But at site level, for all new staff that come into the schools, we have a whole new induction process, which is better. Than we have a better, more informed, ongoing yearly training cycle for you guys as well, to ensure that you're being trained quite regularly on all the different areas of methodology we need to meet the different needs of children, okay? Now, a lot of that training is being developed in association with a group called Psychology Associates, which co-produces these modules with us in the way that we want, but also using kind of research-based methodologies to work with the children. So I think that's gonna go down really, really well. We're gonna include Bridge Academy. So Bridge Academy is gonna be a new platform, which actually will be separate from BridgeLink, but effectively it's an online e-learning platform, which will have modules that all of our staff will go through and that you can constantly revisit to understand if you need to do something. So it's basically like a spaghetti bridge encyclopedia of how to do everything, which will be great. So we're really excited about that. We're also solidifying base level structure, systems, and processes, which is very general. And then finally, we're introducing new student profiles in BridgeLink, which Nikki's going to show you later. Now, these are really exciting, where you are going to be able to now log in and pick a student and see all the relevant information in one dashboard, in one space for them there, which I think will be really, really helpful for you guys, which will be powerful. So lastly, a massive thank you to all you guys. Once again, I cannot thank you all enough. We cannot do this on our own. We are a team. We're a collection of people that do that all together. And if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't achieve the things we achieve. So thank you so much. That's BridgeFest 24. Thank you.